Well, howdy there, folks. Welcome back to Manual Goat Farm. You know, goats are such curious and playful creatures, but sometimes, just like any animal, they can get a little feisty. Now, I've dealt with my fair share of ornery critters in my time, and let me tell you, an aggressive goat can be a real handful. But don't you worry, we're gonna tackle this head on, just like a billy goat charges a fence post. Over the years, I've learned that understanding why goats act the way they do is half the battle. Once you know what makes them tick, you can start to anticipate their behavior and handle them safely and effectively. And that's what we're going to cover today. Practical tips and tricks to keep your herd happy, healthy, and, most importantly, safe. So, stick around, and I'll share some tried and true methods that'll have you handling those grumpy goats like a seasoned rancher in no time. Welcome back to Manual Goat Farm. Ever dealt with an aggressive goat? Today I'm going to share practical tips to understand goat behavior and safely handle aggressive goats to maintain a peaceful farm. Let's get started. Now, before we go wrangling any rambunctious goats, we gotta understand what makes them act up in the first place. You see, aggression in goats ain't always just about being mean. More often than not, it's their way of communicating something's wrong, just like a dog barking or a cat hissing. One of the biggest culprits is their natural instincts, especially territoriality. Goats, by nature, are herd animals with a strong sense of pecking order. They establish dominance hierarchies within their groups, and sometimes that means a little headbutting to sort things out. It's their way of saying, "This is my space, buddy." Then there's the whole breeding season shenanigans. During this time, the males, those billy goats, get a surge of hormones that would make a bull blush. They become more assertive, more vocal, and yes, more prone to aggression. It's all part of their natural instinct to compete for mates. But aggression ain't always about dominance or love, sometimes it's plain old fear. Goats can be skittish creatures, easily spooked by loud noises, sudden movements, or even unfamiliar people. When they feel threatened, their first line of defense is often to go on the offensive. Now, how do you know if a goat's feeling aggressive? Well, they got a whole repertoire of behaviors that'll give you a clue. Headbutting, of course, is a classic sign. But you also gotta watch out for charging, stomping their feet, and even a stiff upright posture with their ears laid back. Those are all warning signs that say, back off, I mean business. Understanding these signs is crucial because it gives you a chance to react appropriately and avoid escalating the situation. Remember, prevention is always better than cure, especially when you're dealing with a horned critter. Now folks, just like you wouldn't wait for a pot to boil over before turning down the heat, you don't want to wait for a goat to ram you before realizing it's upset. The key to handling aggressive goats is to recognize those early warning signs and address them before things escalate. One of the first things you'll notice is a change in their demeanor. A normally friendly goat might become withdrawn or unusually quiet. They might start staring you down with those intense eyes, giving you the evil eye, so to speak. Another telltale sign is stomping their feet. It's their way of saying, hey, I'm not happy about this. And if they start pawing the ground, that's a sure sign that they're getting ready to charge. You might also see them posturing, trying to make themselves look bigger and more intimidating. They'll stand tall, puff out their chests, and raise their heads high in the air. It's all a bluff, of course, but you don't want to call their bluff when they've got those horns. Now, the worst thing you can do when you see these signs is to react aggressively yourself. Yelling, waving your arms, or running towards them will only make things worse. Remember, fear is a major trigger for aggression in goats. Instead, take a deep breath and approach the situation calmly and assertively. Use a firm but gentle voice, and avoid making any sudden movements. If the goat sees that you're not a threat, it's more likely to back down. Remember folks, prevention is key. By learning to read your goat's body language and responding appropriately, you can often defuse a potentially dangerous situation before it even starts. Alright folks, let's say you've got a goat that's beyond posturing and is getting downright pushy. It's time to show him who's boss, but we're gonna do it the right way. With safe and humane handling techniques. First and foremost, never, and I mean never, approach an aggressive goat head-on. That's just asking for trouble. Remember, goats are prey animals at heart, and they're hardwired to protect their flanks. So always approach from the side or slightly behind, where they feel less threatened. Now, if you need to get a hold of a feisty goat, the key is to use gentle but firm pressure. Grabbing them by the horns or legs is a big no-no. Not only is it painful for the goat, but it'll likely make them struggle even more. Instead, try using a halter and lead rope. A halter gives you more control and allows you to guide the goat without causing any discomfort. If you don't have a halter handy, you can try using a slip lead or even a piece of rope tied in a loose loop around their neck. Once you've got a hold of the goat, keep your movements slow and deliberate. Avoid jerking or pulling on the lead, as this will only make them resist even more. Instead, use gentle pressure and coax them along, and don't forget the power of your voice. Talking to the goat in a calm, soothing tone can work wonders in calming them down. It lets them know that you're not a threat and that everything's going to be alright. Remember folks, handling an aggressive goat is all about patience, understanding, and a whole lot of gentle persuasion. Now folks, just like you can train a dog to fetch or a cat to use a scratching post, you can train a goat to behave itself. It might take a little time and patience, but with the right approach, you can teach even the most stubborn old goat new tricks. One of the most effective methods is positive reinforcement. The idea is to reward the goat for good behavior, which encourages them to repeat that behavior in the future. It's all about associating positive experiences with desirable actions. So how do you reward a goat? Well, goats are motivated by food just like any other farm animal. So keep some tasty treats on hand like apple slices, carrot pieces, or even a handful of grain. Whenever the goat exhibits a desired behavior like walking calmly on a lead or backing up when asked, give them a treat and some verbal praise. Another useful technique is redirecting attention. If you see a goat starting to get worked up or showing signs of aggression, try distracting them with something else. You can offer them a toy, throw a ball for them to chase, or even just start talking to them in a soothing voice. The key is to break their focus on whatever is triggering their aggression and redirect their attention to something more positive. It's like waving a shiny object in front of a baby to stop them from crying. Now I know some folks believe in using punishment to correct bad behavior, but let me tell you, that's the wrong approach with goats. Punishment will only make them fearful and more likely to act out in the future. Remember folks, training a goat is all about building trust and positive associations. With a little patience and consistency, you can teach your goats to be well-behaved members of the farm family. Now folks, sometimes aggression in goats ain't about the goat itself, but about the environment they're living in. Just like people get grumpy when they're cramped, hungry, or stressed, goats can get mighty ornery if their living conditions ain't up to snuff. First things first, make sure your goats have enough space. Overcrowding is a surefire recipe for aggression, as goats need their personal space just like any other creature. A good rule of thumb is to provide at least 10 to 20 square feet of space per goat inside the barn, and around 200 to 500 square feet of pasture space per goat. Next, let's talk about food and water. Just like you wouldn't want to share a sandwich with a hungry bear, you don't want to make goats compete for their grub. Make sure they have access to plenty of fresh hay, clean water, and a balanced diet. A hungry goat is a grumpy goat, and a grumpy goat is more likely to butt heads. Now, goats are social animals and they thrive in herds, but sometimes you might have a couple of individuals who just don't get along. In these cases, it might be necessary to separate them to avoid any conflicts. And finally, let's not forget about enrichment. Goats are curious and playful creatures, and they need mental stimulation just like any other animal. Providing them with toys, scratching posts, and climbing structures can go a long way in keeping them entertained and out of trouble. Remember folks, a happy goat is a well-adjusted goat, and a well-adjusted goat is less likely to resort to aggression. So, take a good look at your goat's environment and make any necessary adjustments to create a peaceful and harmonious living space. Well folks, there you have it. Handling aggressive goats doesn't have to be a rodeo. With a little understanding, patience, and the right techniques, you can create a safe and peaceful environment for both you and your herd. Remember, it's all about clear communication, gentle handling, and a whole lot of love. And who knows, with a little time and effort, you might just find that those once grumpy goats become some of your most loving and affectionate companions. After all, deep down, they're just big softies with horns. So go on, get out there and give those goats a good scratch behind the ears. They'll thank you for it, or at least they won't try to headbutt you. With patience and understanding, you can manage and even prevent aggression in your goats. Share your experiences or ask questions in the comments below. Subscribe to Manual Goat Farm for more useful farming tips. Happy farming!